The many faces of C9orf72. The many faces of C9orf72, unraveling the complex web of genetics, narcissism, and trauma. In the realm of neurodegenerative diseases, few genetic markers are as complex, chaotic, or misunderstood as the C9orf72 hexanucleotide repeat expansion. For decades, medicine viewed conditions like frontotemporal dementia, FTD, and amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, as distinct isolated tragedies. Today, we know that for many families, these are merely different expressions of the same genetic anomaly. However, the clinical definition often fails to capture the human reality. The C9orf72 mutation does not just attack neurons, it attacks family systems. To truly understand this condition, we must look beyond the microscope and examine the full spectrum of its manifestation. From the psychiatric wards to the silent suffering of family members and the nuanced interplay between pathological narcissism and biological decay. 1. The clinical chameleon, beyond just memory loss. The C9orf72 mutation is pleiotropic, meaning a single genetic variant can produce vastly different symptoms in different individuals, even within the same family. It is a systemic disruptor of the nervous system. While FTD and ALS are the most well-known outcomes, the gene's expression is far more insidious and widespread. The expanded phenotype. Frontotemporal dementia, FTD, specifically the behavioral variant, BVFTD, characterized by a loss of empathy, disinhibition, and executive dysfunction. ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, a deterioration of motor neurons leading to physical paralysis. Psychiatric onset. Long before cognitive decline, carriers often manifest severe psychiatric symptoms. Misdiagnoses of bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and major depression are common. Epilepsy and seizures. The mutation creates a state of cortical hyperexcitability. This can lead to overt seizures or subtle epileptiform activity that disrupts consciousness. Stroke mimics. Carriers may experience episodes that clinically resemble strokes, slurred speech, sudden confusion, or temporary paralysis, yet lack the vascular blockages seen in traditional strokes. These are often neurological short circuits related to the gene. Eating disorders. A specific compulsion known as hyperphagia, obsessive overeating, or craving for sweets, is a hallmark of the FTD presentation, often mislabeled as a simple lack of self-control. Sudden death. Due to the autonomic nervous system's involvement and the risk of seizures, there is an elevated risk of sudden death, including SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, sometimes occurring in middle age before advanced dementia sets in. One of the most painful aspects for families is the intersection of the disease with narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. Disentangling who is speaking, the person or the disease, requires a nuanced understanding of two distinct trajectories. Type A, the unmasked narcissist, exacerbation. In this scenario, the individual possessed narcissistic traits or full-blown NPD long before the onset of dementia. They were historically manipulative, grandiose, and lacking in empathy. When FTD strikes, it destroys the frontal lobes, the brain's brake pedal. For a lifelong narcissist, this filter was the only thing keeping their behavior within socially manageable limits. As the disease progresses, the mask falls. Completely. The covert manipulation becomes overt aggression. The calculated cruelty becomes impulsive rage. The disease does not create the narcissism. It unleashes it, stripping away the ability to hide their true nature. Type B, the acquired sociopath, phenocopy. In contrast, some individuals were genuinely empathetic, kind, and warm prior to illness. Here, the FTD creates a phenocopy of narcissism. The atrophy in the brain's social centers physically erases their ability to care about others. They seem narcissistic because they become self-centered, cold, and rigid, but this is a direct result of tissue loss, not a lifelong personality structure. Distinguishing between these two is vital for the family's processing of history. Was the parent always abusive, or did they become a stranger? With C9orf72, both realities can exist in the same lineage. 3. The silent victims, the family narrative. In the medical model, the focus is exclusively on the patient. The doctors treat the individual carrying the diagnosis. However, this often invalidates the decades of trauma experienced by the family. Families carrying the C9orf72 mutation often live in a war zone long before a diagnosis is made. Children grow up walking on eggshells around a parent with unexplained rage, paranoia, or emotional distance. Spouses are subjected to years of gaslighting. When the diagnosis finally comes, the narrative shifts to pity for the sick. The family is expected to become caregivers for their abusers. The trauma of the survivors is frequently overshadowed by the tragedy of the disease. It is crucial to validate that surviving a pathological family system is its own injury. The biological explanation for the abuse does not erase the psychological scar tissue it left behind. 4. The internal hell, the suffering of the narcissist. It is easy to demonize the aggressor, especially when narcissism is involved. However, a comprehensive view must acknowledge the profound suffering of the individual with NPD/FTD. For a person with narcissistic traits, their entire self-worth is built on control, image, and autonomy. C9orf72 is a disease of loss of control. As they sense their cognitive faculties slipping, their physical strength waning in ALS overlap, or their autonomy being stripped away by caregivers, they experience a perpetual narcissistic injury. This is an energetic hell. They are fighting a losing battle against their own biology to maintain a facade of superiority. This internal conflict, combined with the biological impulsivity caused by frontal lobe damage, creates a statistically high risk for suicide. They are not merely being difficult, they are experiencing the disintegration of the self in real time, often without the emotional tools to grieve or process it. Conclusion. The C9orf72 mutation is not simply a medical diagnosis. It is a multi-generational phenomenon that blurs the lines between psychiatry, neurology, and family dynamics. It creates victims on all sides. It creates individuals who lose their minds and bodies to a cruel degeneration. It creates family members who are held hostage by behavior that is chemically induced yet personally devastating. Understanding the full scope of this gene, from the seizures and stroke mimics to the complex interplay with narcissism, does not excuse abuse. However, it provides the necessary framework for comprehension. By acknowledging that both the predator and the prey can be casualties of the same genetic error, we can finally begin to separate the person from the pathology.